Yeah, there we go. That's better.
That would be us. Hey, everybody, it's Uncle Grumpy, and welcome to Grumpy Tonight. As you can see tonight, we're joined by Jed Green. Jed Green is the head of Orca. Orca is the organization that has put out two petitions recently, both one a medical constitutional amendment and a full access constitutional amendment. Jed and I have kind of bumped heads on a couple issues here, and we thought it was really important for us to come on here and show a couple things. For me, it was about showing everybody exactly what's in this petition and getting everybody interested enough to open that screen and to start reading. But it's also to show everybody that we don't always have to agree, to remain respectful and to still work together, because we are still working together. There's neither one of us is throwing our arms up in the air and walking away from the table. So, Jed, I want to thank you for coming on tonight.
Sure.
Go ahead and say hi to everybody, and we'll get started here in a second. I'm going to share this to a couple places.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well this evening. And yeah, I think it's Grumpy. Thanks for having me on to cuss and discuss a little bit further. One thing that one thing that I think that we run into a lot of times in communication with each other is that concept of what is lost in text. We know that 55% of what is said a lot of times is actually nonverbal, communication and cues. It's tone of voice, it's body language, things like that. So when we reduce it down to text, it's a lot of what we are saying can go away. And I think that leads a lot of times to what may be perceived as, conflicting conversation. And by removing the tone, you alter the tone per se. So again, I think it's when we were having our last conversation on a thread, I'm glad that we're able to say, okay, hold on here. Why don't we get together face to face and talk this out and see if we can improve the dialogue there? So
yeah, and like I said, for me, most of this is about something I hear a lot, and that's transparency. So really what I want to do is I just want to ask you a bunch of questions, so we can all get a sense of what's going on, who you are, what this is about, and why we should or shouldn't support it. So I'm not going at this from an attack position so much as just I'm questioning some things, and I would just like you to please take the time to explain why and how you're doing a few things. So does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good. And also know that in that I may have some rhetorical questions as well. And I believe that that is important as part of a process to get folks to think, get folks to think about what we're talking about doing here. This isn't something that's this effort isn't the Jed Green show. It's never meant to be. And so I want to make sure that we all think about what's going on here. So I will answer everything straightforward as I always do, but I may also have my own questions,
Great. All right. Sounds good. Let's start with the basics, Jed, because I still, when I talk to people and I tell them, have you seen the petition? Because, I've done everything I can to spread the word. Some of them ask me who Orca is, and I say Jed Green's the head of Orca. Beyond that, I don't know. And they say, who's Jed Green? So just start by telling us who you are, maybe what you did before this.
Sure. Yeah. For folks that
now.
Yeah, sure. So for folks that don't know me, in the last 30 years, I've basically done three things: construction, campaigns, and cannabis. And so fast forwarding past the initial 15 and as a working as a general contractor, I got about 15 years ago, I got involved in politics in the state of Oklahoma and have done a lot of campaigns in the state, from the municipal to the presidential level, over 100 of them now, really, since about 2006, 2007. And so fast forward to cannabis world, I worked as during the effort to pass 788. I held the role of being the director of the Yes on 788 PAC, which was held by the folks, some of the folks that had gathered signatures and worked to bring together folks who are on the industry side that helped get dollars into a campaign and put that together. So I served that function on the during the Yes on 788 campaign, and then I've been active a lot of times behind the scenes with trying to help folks find compromise at the Capitol the last 3 years, and that's based on, again, having 15 years in doing campaigns and such. I know a lot of the folks that are up there, and have helped a number of them. So I never, the folks that I've helped there, I never ask them for anything, but what I seek to do is to say, hey, you ought to talk to these folks, or here's kind of a, it looks like there's kind of a political bind here, where's the compromise in that?
Let me,
sure.
Sorry to interrupt. Let me add to that I think that might have been where we met the first time was at the Capitol, or it might have been at your office, but Norma Sapp and I saw you frequently at the Capitol doing the same thing as us, talking to people and trying to get things done. So yeah, I remember you being up there quite a bit.
Yeah, sure. No, I can't remember. I think you were there right after the passage of 788. One of the things that I worked on was to work to bring together our community at that time, made up of patient advocates, made up of industry advocates, and work together to try to work on legislation through the working group. And so we actually had a meeting. I believe you were there. I know Norma was there. A lot of other folks were there, and a lot of other folks were there. And I mean, hell, I cooked chicken, potatoes, and carrots for everyone. We sat down.
I remember that.
Yeah. And that's what I do. It's, there's a lot of folks that may not always get along. And, at different points in time, we always remember that we are a community. So, that's the kind of stuff that I do. You don't necessarily see me a lot, but I kind of pop up here and there to try to help where I can.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. All right. So let's start with the basics beyond you. Let's look at this organization. Who is Orca?
So right now, Orca is really anyone that wants to participate in this process. Orca has been founded as a 501c4 nonprofit. So it's not a C3 that's your typical nonprofit. It's not a C6, which is a trade association. A C4 is what you'll hear in political terms be referred to as a super PAC.
Okay, I hate to get too personal, but can I ask who's on that paperwork? Who's that registered under, and who's this super PAC registered under? Is this you?
Yeah. I'm one of 3 directors, and what we have right now is we have in the professional world, forming organizations like this and then handing them off is a professional service that I and others provide. And so that's what we have right now. And what the intent is that we need a vehicle to be able to raise dollars into in order to fund an initiative petition effort. If the community as a whole comes together behind what we are doing, then at some point in time, I would hope that we could, hand this thing off. One thing that I've made clear in a lot of conversations to folks early on about Orca is that anyone who wants to be a member can be a member simply by giving us their contact information. If I don't have your contact information, then that's all it is. The organization otherwise will just be funded by donation.
Okay. Can I ask who the other 2 directors are?
Huh?
Can I ask who the other 2 directors are? You said it was you and 2 other directors.
No, I'm the director. and I'm the director, the interim director. And then I am going to actually hold the names of the other two. If you want to go ahead and look that up, if you want to go ahead and broadcast that, that's fine. But I am not going to, during this process, I'm not going to say, hey, I talked to this person or I talked to that person. The folks that are there, I will tell you this right now. The folks that are there as a professional service, okay? The sooner that we can get them off of that paperwork, the better. So what I hope to see is and I've reached out and started reaching out to try to find folks to fill that position. So ultimately, I want someone to fill my position on this deal.
Okay,
That's
well,
what I would really like to see.
I'll tell you, I won't be looking up and posting their names. Obviously, it's public information.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I'll leave that up to the people that are watching.
Sure.
And I'm sure they'll do that. So
Sure.
I have to ask the questions. So
yeah, no, you're fine.
so why was Orca started again? Explain what's the purpose here. What problems is Orca trying to solve? And when you say you want to turn this over, and you say it's anyone who wants to sign up, I could see where this is going, and it sounds good. So I'm asking, where is this leading? What do you mean? Can you explain more by you're eventually going to want to turn it over to who, what, or what?
Well, the way I look at it is that the one thing, and this is where let me, I want to step back a couple of spots here and make sure we're covering all the things that I'm being asked as we go along. Okay. The first is how is this thing funded and what is its purpose, which we touched on. The thing to know is that what we are not doing, and this is where it's different and where it's weird and where I'm sure that I'll get thrown under the bus for a lack of transparency. Okay. I know that's coming.
Well, hey, look,
no,
hold
on.
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to burn you for that, but I
no, it's fine. It's fine. I didn't say that to you. Okay. Right. You see, I understand exactly what I've set up and I understand what I'm setting myself up for. Okay. That's fine. I know that there will be a bad reaction to me saying, I'm sorry, I'm not going to throw professionals under the bus. Okay.
It wasn't.
Yeah. So no, it's fine. It's fine.
So I fully understand.
It's fine. So what I'm saying is,
understand that.
Right. So here's the thing, Chris. Here's the thing, is that what we are not doing is what's important here. What we are not doing is establishing an organization by, for example, selling board seats. You notice that I didn't come out and say, hey, I've got this illustrious board of all of these folks, and therefore we are the dominant organization in Oklahoma and everyone should listen to us, right?
Yes, I've had three trade organizations contact me this year that are offering those things. We're going to run a petition. Oh, here's how much it is to be on the board. And I just laugh.
And
but
hey,
I know what you're talking about. I understand that. And again, let me say again, I understand the need. Again, I met you at the Capitol. You and I don't necessarily walk in all the same circles, but we know some of the same people. I've burned in this community for keeping those things quiet that we must keep quiet, because when you get to sit at those tables, if you go out and you run your mouth like it doesn't matter, then you don't get to sit at those tables anymore. So I understand the need to keep it quiet, but I have to ask the questions because, again, as I said, we burned a year and a half ago in the public eye for being behind 806, or for showing, not for even being behind them, for showing the public, just like we have with these petitions, for showing the public 806 and 807, we were torched because we couldn't give those names. So I have to ask the question, or everybody would wonder what I'm doing here. So, it's up to you whether you want to share that information or not. Again, I understand the need to keep it.
Yeah, no, and I'll tell you, exactly what'll happen. Okay. I'll tell you exactly what'll happen is that if folks want to if folks want to make a ruckus about professionals that are friendly to our community, that are willing to hold these temporary roles, then I'll tell you right now what'll happen. Those roles will immediately be vacated and I'll have to refill them on the spot. So if you want to nuke us that way, go ahead, but it won't actually stop anything that we are doing.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Okay.
So, that's the thing. So again, back to my point, what we're not doing is we're not going about this selling board seats. I want people to step up. And that's my point on this, on the development of a board. And what is so unorthodox about this is that I want to see who actually steps up and helps over the next 6 to 12 months. That's what I want to see. And if folks do that and they come at this in a positive fashion, those are the folks that need to be on this and ones that I'd feel, comfortable supporting in the future. Now, to that end, financial transparency is a big, big deal to me. Okay. I've done this an awful lot, and it is a liability for myself and everyone else who is on that paperwork. It is a liability for us to step out here and do this. So what we can expect is, as that dollars go into the account, we will have a page dedicated to reporting weekly donation and expenditure, where it's going to go. I can promise you that. There will always be complete transparency with the dollars. Now, does that mean that I'm going to take in 2 cents in on saying, well, you really should have spent it on flyers instead of staff? No, I'm not going to do that. Transparency does not allow for micromanagement from the peanut gallery. So, that's what it is. Either folks, have a degree of confidence when they support this organization and what we do. And keep in mind, early on here, the first 12 to 18 months, this organization is basically focused to do one thing. And that is to get these petitions, to get them in the field, to get signatures, and to get them across the finish line. If at the end of that, it's a hot mess and everyone is unhappy, we can dissolve the organization just as quickly as we can work to keep it going. That's going to be up to folks in the long haul. Okay, this is not something I want to do. This is something I need to do to help.
So now that we've set all that up, let's get a little bit into what the purpose here is. What are the problems that Orca intends to try and solve with these petitions, if you could, kind of general, big picture, and because we're going to get into the details a little bit in a minute.
What the purpose of Orca is?
Yeah, what problems is Orca trying to solve? What was the reason?
Why
did you feel?
Good Lord!
Well, what brought you to the point? What brought you to the point of this? What was it that brought you to the point of creating Orca and getting these petitions going?
Well, in 2 words, government refusal.
Okay, first part of Grumpy there. Yeah, government refusal united many people to say yes. You're trying to get everybody grumpy again. So, and I'm all about getting people grumpy. So I'm happy to go through this with you. But
and that's what it is it's government refusal. It really is. And what we've seen is government refusal to actually work through and get the statutory language that we've needed in place. Government refusal to focus on our program as opposed to the piggy bank attached to it. The lack of enforcement that we see that has led to a number of the problems that we have within our state, not just our community, but in our state, basically stems from a refusal at the executive level within the OSDH to do their job. And so that's what leads us here to this point. We've worked with them for what, 3 or 4 years now, and they've only gotten so far. A good part of what is in these petitions are actually things that have had support in one part of the legislature, but do not have the support of the governor and do not have the support of the other part of the legislature. Things such as creating a freestanding OMMA. Those, these are things that have been worked to be pushed through. And so, that's what a lot of this is.
Let me ask you a question, kind of a side note. I know it's Governor Stitt that doesn't want to create a standalone agency. I know he's against creating another government agency.
Right.
So these petitions would be voted on at the same time he runs for re-election, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
I mean, that'll be up to him. What
But
we'll
more
have
than
is
likely,
if we are able to gather the signatures by roughly February, the governor will have a choice whether to put it on the midterm primary, which would be the June 2022 primary, or the June 2022 general election. It will be his pick at that point.
now, do you think maybe they feel like they made that mistake with 788 and they're not going to make it again about putting it in the primaries, thinking not enough people would turn up?
Well, if you look at what the numbers were for the general election that year, which we're going to probably see a turnout drop in this midterm, we've got the votes to win a general. So whether they want to put it in the primary or the general, they can do whatever they want, but we'll have the votes there.
Okay, that's kind of big picture. I can see getting the signatures, but the votes, do you think the state right now, do you have any polling or anything that shows the state would vote for either one of these petitions?
We haven't run any surveys ourselves. I've heard some rumors of other surveys, but one thing about polling and surveys, if anyone ever tells you, hey, I've got a survey that says this, ask for the data.
Right. I understand that the survey all depends on the questions. I get that. I'm just asking if there's, if you have any evidence to back up what you just said, that we definitely have the votes, to get this passed at the poll.
No, here's where I believe we're at. I believe that we've got a really strong chance of passing medical, and I believe that we are at best a coin flip on adult use. Any polling that I've seen, any legit polling that I've seen recently in the last 2 years, we are adult use is pegging consistently at 42 to 44%. It's going to be a gigantic lift to get adult use done. Medical, on the other hand, one of the worst questions that I've heard of asked was, would you repeal 788? And 48% said that they would. Now, that's an interesting loaded question, because I bet I could come back with another question that says, hey, if we had a bill that took care of the problems that we have right now regarding medical marijuana program, would you vote for that? I bet we wind up hitting 60 to 65% that way, of the same group of people asked. Because what we're doing is, we're not saying it's bad, would you repeal it? We're saying it's a little rough, we need to clean it up, would you be good with that? So I think that even some of the roughest numbers from people that are known to be in opposition, the best they've got still indicates that we've got a clean path to victory. The other thing to keep in mind is that, and this is something important for folks to know, remember how we had a 43,000 overvote for 788? Okay, yeah. So on June 26th, we had 43,000 more people voted for the ballot question of state 788 than we had in both of the gubernatorial races combined. It's an overvote. 43,000 people came out and said and voted for nothing but 788.
Right.
Here's the important thing to know. Anyone who has not voted since the 2018 general election has now been expunged has now been taken off of the voter rolls. So part of what's going to need to happen here, if we're going to support this issue, is we're going to have to go out and re-register about 50,000 people.
That's a lot of work. That's how I got started.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the votes are there. We just have to go get them.
I'll have to get my motorcycle back on the road if we're going to do that.
There you go. Get out there, roll around. And,
well,
you know,
my social anxiety was so bad back then that
right.
I couldn't sit at a table, and I've never had the face that says, come over and talk to me. So, I had to find a new way to get to people. So I started doing the videos, agreeing to ride my motorcycle to your house anywhere in Oklahoma and sit on your couch and help you register to vote. That way I only had to take on 1 or 2 people at a time. And that's what I did. And sometimes it was 4 or 5 hours each way to register one person, but it was huge. And I got to where I was then dropping off stacks of registration papers with other people along my journey who were doing the sitting at the table and that had the faces and I would then come back by and pick up the filled out and go turn them into the respective counties. So that was how I got started. Me and the motorcycle.
Nice.
And my iPhone. That was it.
Nice. Hey, it's a good time. It's a good time.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how it goes this time.
So let's get back at it here. Okay. So, all right. I understand why 2 petitions. We can't really put both these subjects in the same petition. But why 2 constitutional amendments? Would either one or both of these be better as state statutes were like we did 788? Or what do you think about that? Why constitutional amendments with these?
Well, there are a couple of different reasons. We've seen erosion of patient rights. HIPAA protections were removed by 2646. So if patients want to know that their rights are guaranteed, then we put them in the Constitution. If that's not important to have in the Constitution as opposed to statute, that slims us down a number. If the other thing is like we've seen the last couple of years, and you talked about it, getting hammered for it, is again, 806 and 807 was a constitutional measure. And my point is basically this: if Oklahomans with Oklahoma dollars want to continue to guide our own destiny with our laws, until we put law into the Constitution, someone else is liable to come along and do it. So it's just simply a choice. Do we want to settle this program down? And a lot of what I've heard is the number one thing that folks want to see, from legislators to businesses to people, is we need to settle this program down. Well, it doesn't ultimately happen until we put it in the Constitution, in the Oklahoma Constitution.
Okay. Do you realize this increases the size of the Constitution by 25 to 40%, depending on whether one or both of these pass?
Well, the recreational is about the same size as what 806 or 807 were.
Right. I'm saying the total.
And here's another thing to think about. Okay. Right now you're looking at a page count that's based on formatting that's easy to read.
Oh, no, I understand.
The page count can be reduced. And here's something else. I want to talk about the concept of the Constitution. Okay. The United States Constitution is a very set document. The Oklahoma Constitution is a constitution that was written after 45 other states had written theirs. States that don't allow in their constitution the citizens to exercise their power to create law. Oklahoma is a populous state. Our Constitution was written in a manner that encourages and allows for the people to do this. So when we talk about what the Constitution is, let's look at the spirit in which that Constitution was written. I told everyone at the get-go of this that's been part of the early phases of drafting and so on and so forth. I told everyone that I did not want to put any more into the Constitution than what we had to, given the situation that we were in. And so, again, I really would rather not have to do this right now. I would just assume that we had gotten more responsible action out of our government the last 3 years than we have. So, that's my perspective on it. Is it something that, may increase the size of the Constitution? Yeah, okay,
Okay, well, let me give you my feedback on the Constitution.
sure.
I've been calling for a constitutional amendment since the end of the session of 2019, and to go for full access since that point. So you're not getting grief from me about changing the Constitution. I'm just trying to size up what we're doing here. Me personally, I think if we're going to change the Constitution, even though it's just the Oklahoma Constitution, I think that from my perspective, it should be to affect the person, the individual freedom and liberty of the individual, maybe even to the extent of going into or participating in an industry. But this seems to be, in a nutshell, more about the 17, which we say they're going to be shortened, 15 pages of regulation. And so that, for me, that's why I question why this in the Constitution. I'm not against affecting the Constitution. It's just how we do it. And most people react poorly to the idea, not myself, but most react poorly to the idea of changing the Constitution, because it will be so hard if we get down the road and have a problem or need something adjusted. And I could see a lot of places here where that's gonna happen. So I question this in the Constitution.
So okay, so what do you have there then that you see that down the road is going to need to be adjusted?
One of the things that I question is this creates 56 jobs. This puts 56 jobs in this agency in the Constitution. 5 or 10 years down the road, that we may not need half that, because
Okay,
federal law is going to change and everything else is going to change. So this seems bloated.
Actually, Chris,
Mhm.
it creates commissioner, director, it creates about 7 jobs.
It then creates 5 assistants for each one of those.
No, those are not assistants. You're reading that wrong, sir.
Okay, well, Lawrence has come up with 56 jobs, so I'm going to go with
Lawrence is wrong.
that. Okay, we'll go back and double check that.
Yeah, please do. Please
Okay.
do. No, this is designed to reduce bureaucratic bloat.
Okay. All right, let's see here. How are you going to get the signatures? I'm curious about that. What's the
Well,
plan?
hold on. Before we move on, you said you had a lot of things that you felt that would be problems in the future. Let's go back to that. What else do we have besides the assistants and such?
There's an issue with immigration. The way this is worded, you're going to have to be a legal citizen of the US. You're also going to have to show that, prove that. The way it is now, you can get your card with a simple license. So this is going to,
Yeah, you have to be a lawful resident.
right, which means you're going to have to prove your legal residency, not just your lease or something like that, like it is now. So if
Well, you don't have to prove a lease for a patient card.
well,
You have to have an ID.
or a lease. So this is going to make it considerably harder. Even people who were born here are going to have to prove that to get a card, and it's not that way right now.
It won't be any more than what is already required.
But that's not how it's written, because it talks about requiring your immigration. It talks about, as you
It doesn't
said,
say anything about immigration, Chris.
right.
It talks
but
about
says you have to
it
be a
talks about the
legal
need
resident.
for being I'm sorry.
It talks about being a legal resident.
Yes, a United States resident.
And that's not what's required now. So, and even if it is, do we want to close the door to people who aren't legal residents and feed the black market? I thought,
Do they have access now?
as I said, yes, they can get a card now.
Well, let's, take another look at it and, double check and cross I's and dot T's.
Okay. All right, let's see. I've got a question about the taxes. You've got the taxes on the full access petition at 15%. But you also give the legislator the ability to raise it to 20%. I say that if this is even necessary, then the attitude at the Capitol must be so bad that they're going to immediately raise this to 20% anyway, putting us at an extremely high tax rate. Why would we not want to be at one of the lowest tax rates instead of mid to high? What's going to end up high? I mean,
I think that 15% is kind of the average that we see across the nation.
So why do we want to be average? We could go no higher than 10 and be one of the lowest. There's a few other states that do 10, and this is something we've argued about several times. So
yeah.
Bring this up. I think taxes is too high.
Yeah, no. Here's the number one concern that I have in doing this, especially with constitutional measure, and that is that we don't fuck up the medical program. And that is what one of the big concerns has been, and what we see in a lot of other states is that passing full access screwed up the medical program. And so what we have is a very successful program in a lot of ways, and it's a revenue positive program. So what we want to do, the easiest way that we could basically crash out our medical program would be to turn it into a revenue negative situation. So the way it's set up is that if full access passes, that it will, over the course of a year, remove the tax rate on medical card holders. So basically, as we've heard a lot of folks say and advocate for the last 3 years, man, why do we have this extra 7% tax rate on patients? We don't get taxed on our prescriptions at Walgreens. Why isn't that applied to MMJ? This is a patient first situation in my mind. So that's what I've heard from the vast majority. So we put the patients first by reducing the cost of their medication by the tax rate on it. So if we're going to remove that, we'll probably have we'll have a lot of patients. We don't yet know exactly what that recreational market is going to look like. So what we're doing is we're going at a tax rate on the recreational side that we believe will continue to cover surplus revenue in the program. I believe that we also allowed the legislature to reduce that tax rate on recreational as well. If we don't, we can make sure that we do. They can reduce it if they'd like to.
I don't think it does. So that would put
we'll double check that.
So that's going to put the taxes at 30% right there, and that's before the federal government does anything.
15, somewhere around 22 to 23. Yeah.
Well, no, that would if the excise tax is 20%.
15.
Okay, 15. But if you're allowing them to raise it to 20, they're going to. So I'm just assuming it's going to be 20. I don't.
Well, now you say that, but keep in mind, when is our legislature? There was one instance where they actually raised taxes on us. That's something that's kind of, and okay, let's just imagine that they will. So what do we got?
Look, half of them would repeal 788 if they could do it politically and survive. So yeah,
well, they can.
I know they can't, but they would. So let's just assume they're going to raise it to 20. So you got 20, and then your standard sales tax, which is really all we should be paying. And then you're looking, which is, 9.5 roughly in most cities total, but city and
Right.
county and everything. So you're looking at 30% or just under 30%, depending on where in the state you're shopping, would be then the retail tax on recreational. I think that's entirely too high. And as you said, we don't know what the recreational market's going to be. And as long as we have the card that only requires a little bit of money and a signature, then we're never going to have so many in the state doing rec that it supports what the state's making now. Okay, because this has to come out neutral. And at that high of a rate, once the states around us do something, especially if one of them sees that and undercuts it, we're not going to get much traffic across the border. So where's the tax revenue going to come from? It's going to be a major tax. I mean, even at that, especially at a higher tax, no one's going to want to come across the border when they get their own state if their taxes are lower. Why not make it appetizing? Is my
for example. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there on this, and here's the thing, is that again, the focus here is the first rule is to do no harm to the medical program. Okay. The next thing to note is, remember, we are a coin flip at best on whether recreational is going to pass. A coin flip at best, if this will actually pass. So again, first rule is do no harm to medical. I would like to see a lower tax rate per se, but what we look at is that, let's say, for example, kind of our worst case scenario, right? That we pass both and then no one purchases a single ounce of recreational marijuana product. Everyone keeps their patient cards. No one buys any recreational. There is zero revenue from it. That's our worst case scenario. With our current budget and what we're bringing in, we basically will bring in about $70 million. We'll bring in $50 million less than our current situation. That excise tax is currently worth about $50 million annually to Oklahoma. If we completely lose that, we still have twice the money we need to fund the agency at the level that it is now being funded, with increased enforcement, increased folks, and with the amount of staffing that would be needed for a standalone state agency. So the question is just how much recreational or full access product will be sold. I don't know. I could speculate, but what I do know is that the numbers and the structure that we have will ensure that if we pass full access, it will not screw up the medical program. That's my number one concern.
Well, I don't believe me. I don't have too much problem with the full access petition, so that I can assure you.
It's a tax rate deal, man. Chris, here's the deal, dude. No one's trying to tax. I'm not a fan of taxes. There's just so much there. But at the end of the day, it's going to have some effect. I mean, like you were saying, like, what if other states do this, or what if other states do that? You're talking about Texas. Is Texas seriously anytime in the next 10 years going to match what Oklahoma is doing with marijuana? No, they're not.
Probably not, but we don't know. And we don't, and
right.
Other states around us. Look, I understand.
We've got a safe bet. That's all I'm saying, man. We've got a safe bet.
One of the first things I started talking about when we started talking about full access was the amount of tax revenue we could pull out of Texas. But and I actually started talking about this with Fetgetter, and that's when he came up with his bill. But where he lost me was in the tax rate and the way he wanted to do it. The way we wanted to do it would have made us attractive down the road, not just until Texas does something. And especially if we're going to put it in the Constitution, don't we want to make it, wouldn't we want to think 20 years ahead? I mean, it's not going to be a piece of cake to fix to 15 pages of regulations. It's not going to be a piece of cake to undo that.
And it's really not that much to have to undo. Yeah, and we're not 15 pages of regulations, Chris.
It's currently at 17, but I can agree that it will be smaller when it's formatted different. It will lose a
Oh,
few
well,
pages.
and again, you're not, you're, you know, the entire document also is a lot of patient protections. So keep that separate from what you're talking about,
which is what I think it should be about. So
right.
Great. That's what it should be about. It should be about patient protections. It should be about the individual. It should be about making sure everybody in the state of Oklahoma can home grow. You know, that's been my goal. So I agree with that. I don't think we should put in the Constitution that it's going to be 25% out of state, 75% in state, unless it's publicly traded. Then it's going to be $100,000, or then the license fee is going to go to $100,000. What about small companies? What about the dispensaries that are gathering? I've got friends who have built up 6 dispensaries now. What if she decides to go public somehow to raise capital, and then suddenly her licenses are $100,000 a shot?
Hey, you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because you know, that particular language right there on those ownership, that has not been made public. You know, that was circulated around. Yeah, no, that was circulated around. It's fine. No, I'm glad we're talking about it, because I remember I sent that around about 3 days ago to the working group email thread that we have, that we've had going for a while.
We're working.
Yeah.
As you can tell, we're working.
Yes, I can tell. And that's the thing, is that, you know, that language right there, I hadn't got one damn response out of our working group on that particular language until now. And I'm glad that I got a response, because, you know, and I'm glad we're bringing this up, because the 75-25 rule, so everyone knows, has basically already been abrogated by SB 1033, that now allows for 40% ownership or equity purchase in a grow, processor, or transport license by a publicly traded company. It didn't affect
a North American publicly traded company.
Yes, Canadian.
This was about a Canadian company pushing a bill.
Right. And so guess what, guys? Genie's out of the bottle. We can't reverse that. You might think, hey, we can override that constitutional. Nope, that goes in effect November 1st. So we will damn sure get sued successfully, even if we pass it constitutional. So the sick reality here is that, you know, I floated that language out to say, hey, this is how you could box that in and stop it there, at least until it goes federally legal or there is an effective challenge to it. But all you're doing is holding it off. So what I've heard from you is that, you know, we can't put the 75-25 rule into this document. It's there as a placeholder. But now I'm glad that I've gotten some feedback on it, that workaround to try to hem in the publicly traded companies, for those that would be interested. What I'm hearing is that's a bad idea. So what we can do here.
Let me explain. Hold on. Let me explain why. I don't want people to think I'm all for some huge company coming in and taking over the state. Again, an individual in Oklahoma could be building up a number of dispensaries, and they could decide they want to raise money, so they need to raise capital. They could file some simple paperwork with the FCC. Their company could be valued at as little as, say, $1 million. And they sell 1 million shares at $1 a piece, and they have the capital to double in size. So it could be one of our friends that is that publicly traded company a year from now. So and this would then turn their license into $100,000 each instead of $2,500. I understand it's to try and keep out Philip Morris or whatever, but that's not what it does. And as far as the 25-75, I asked this. Just as a question, I'm kind of on the fence about it myself too, but we know that is actually unconstitutional. It just hasn't been beat in court yet. And in a recent court decision, they decided not to hear a lawsuit from a Washington company against Oklahoma over that 2575. But again, we know it's unconstitutional. It's against some Commerce Clause. Have been round up and down with this with Fett Getter and others. So why are we putting it in the Constitution?
Yeah,
Because it's a lawsuit. We're just going to get it. Isn't that going to be a challenge in itself right there against the petition before it's done?
well, again, the document was thrown out and is written to preserve a lot of the pillars of 788, what we could do. And so that's out there. There's a note in the public draft that says, hey, this is an issue. It's noted in there. And we've talked a lot about it. And the reality is the 75-25 rule ultimately will not stand. Plain and simple. Upon federal legalization, some other, and so it's one of those things where I'm really kind of disappointed that I hadn't gotten a whole lot of feedback on it, but being just completely pragmatic and working, if there was an area that's an automatic, realistically, being very realistic is, and I'm a complete fan of the 75-25 rule. I like it. So, but being completely pragmatic, we probably ought to just go ahead and yank it out of there. And what that means is that if we do that, it will stand as it is in statute right now. So if it wants to change any more than what it was in SB 1033, then that'll be on the legislature. And if we want to fight them on it there, we can fight them on it there. But eventually, even that rule is going down. It's a matter of when, not if.
Okay, well,
so I'd be good just to yank it out of there. Love to get more feedback on it, though.
Have you gotten a lot of feedback? Oh, look, I ask and I say that the reason why I felt like I needed to sound the alarm here wasn't necessarily that I didn't like any of this or anything, but because I haven't seen enough feedback on it. I haven't seen enough people read it. I haven't seen enough people, think it through. So have you got enough
I've
feedback?
Actually got,
but yet I've now heard, according to a post by somebody else, that you're planning on announcing these completed in 48 hours or a little longer, 72 Friday, or is it Friday, this rally?
Oh, no, we're just going to talk about what the update on the current status of it is.
Okay, well, it says on there, you're going to announce the completion of it. And, I heard you were going to be filing it within a week. And so again, it's great that you're very receptive of everything I'm mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds to me like we're not anywhere near ready to file.
Oh, we're getting close to being ready to file. But, again, there may be something caught in the word there. I'd have to I think I saw the post that you're talking about. I'd have to, check it out. But no, as has been on the dock from the get-go, today, the 28th, after a month, is basically when the, initial intent to cut off public comment was. So, we're going to keep screwing with this here for another couple of days. I'm going to turn it over to legal, see what they have, and we'll keep screwing with it for probably another week or two. But the time is coming to do it. Now, I've gotten a lot of feedback on it personally.
I ask who legal is?
Legal could be any one of 5 different groups.
Okay,
I'm gonna,
I understand you don't want to give all names. I understand that, but what my concern is this being looked at by lawyers that practice in constitutional law, or is this being looked at by lawyers that practice in cannabis law?
Both.
It seems like, at least the way it's worded now, it needs constitutional lawyers, maybe even immigration lawyers, and maybe a few others. Seriously.
Well, here's the thing. I have reached out to over a dozen attorneys in the last 12 months. I mean, the last 2 months. I have been keeping them updated on the language. They have a variety of disciplines. Some of them are here in the state, some of them are out of state. So, that feedback has been coming in, this entire time.
Okay. Can you fill me in on who you're getting feedback from or anything and what they're saying? Because again,
Well,
I'm not seeing hardly anything about it. I'm having conversations with everybody I talk to about it because I bring it up, but I'm not seeing a lot. Not
okay,
enough
well,
for me.
Chris,
Not enough for me to understand that the community, or for me to think that the community is understanding of this.
well, I mean, Chris, we all have to remember that we have our fish bowls that we live in.
Okay. All right. So can you tell me what lawyers will be? Do you have lawyers ready for the challenges? And can you tell us who those will be? Because we know after a long conversation with Paul Tay, unfortunately, we know that he already plans a challenge. He'll challenge every petition.
Well, of course he will. And
Yeah,
he'll lose.
well, he has a long-term goal. We've heard that.
No, in order, I don't know if he's doing the nature of his challenge will be interesting. He'll lose. And all he'll be doing is standing in the way of the provisional state of cannabis. So, here's the thing is that, I like Paul, I like everyone. I love the different personalities that are all involved in this. And, here's the thing is that all a court challenge is going to do is going to cost us time. And that's fine. It's assumed. And see that right there, me knowing that challenge is in place,
you should have just assumed that everybody else.
No, I do. No,
we actually
dude, Chris,
spoke to him. So.
Seriously, what makes you think I did not assume that going in?
Yeah, well,
and let me ask you this. No, let me ask you this. You realize that knowing that challenge is there is cutting our entire community off from another 45 days to work on this? Yeah, well, it's all funny and shit. Y'all keep in mind.
Not funny. No, hey, it's not funny at all.
Y'all keep in mind.
Listen, seriously, it's not funny at all because his challenge.
Yeah, it's not.
His challenge last year, his challenge last year on 806 and 807 slowed things down just enough for the coronavirus to hit. Had one of those gotten through, most of what you're worried about would have been taken care of already, and people would no longer be getting arrested for cannabis in Oklahoma because 807 took care of all that. So, yeah, I know it's not a joke at all that he's going to challenge it. I'm just curious as to whether you have lawyers ready to fight this.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do. Exactly. And hey, Chris, exactly who picks it up, what attorney will step up and handle any challenges is going to depend on who wants to. I'll take volunteers first if I believe they're competent, because that's how I raise money, is not spending it. Right.
So let's get to that.
So that being the case, though, I seriously, I want everyone to understand one thing really clear. Everyone can chalk up a good 30 days of time, 45 days of time that we would have had to continue to work on this. You chalk it up to knowing that there's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, well, like I said,
I'm a tour guide, man. That's all I am.
As I said, people are still getting arrested because of the challenge and the circus that turned into the attack on us over things that are now everybody is trying to push. Now everybody's writing in their petitions. So yeah, I understand the problem with delays, believe me. So,
yeah, but we'll be ready for it, man. Dude, again, I've done this professionally for 15 years. I know what the process is. This isn't my first rodeo.
Let me ask you, how do you plan to raise the money, and how do you plan to, so I think they're tied together, how do you plan to get signatures? What's the process going to be?
I'm just going to ask for help on both.
From
Whoever wants to help. It goes back to the concept of what is Orca, who is Orca? Anyone that wants to help.
Okay, so in signature gathering, do you have a way to do that yet? Do you have that you planned? Can you share that?
Yeah, we ask for help. As far as, you know, what that looks like structurally, it looks like a, you know, just basic campaign structure. We'll get everything printed up. We'll do trainings. We'll get that information out to folks that want to help out with it. And I've got, I think, roughly 47 folks signed up already to help.
Okay.
And we haven't even gotten serious yet.
Okay. I have some serious reservations here. I
Sure.
question the overall concept of so much regulation. What I think should be statutory or done through the legislator. It feels like instead of like every other industry, instead of working through the legislator, this industry just wants to put all the rules, or at least a great deal of them, in the Constitution. We definitely need involvement. We definitely need involvement. But again, I question the amount of, not because of the pages, but because I question putting in there all these jobs. I question putting in there beyond
Hold on, seven jobs.
Okay.
Seven jobs.
Beyond
already there.
Beyond creating the agency,
Mhm.
I question putting the jobs, the positions in the Constitution. Again, as I said, I think for doing the Constitution, we should limit it to affecting the individual person's rights and freedoms, even if it pertains to going into or participating in a business. But this is so much more than that. And here's one that you said something to somebody that I didn't understand the reason yet. So I'm looking forward to this one. The 20-pound weight limit on flour for testing. I'm again, like you, I've been talking to people for 3 years, and what has always been the consensus has been that we need to get rid of a weight number, and it needs to be parameters, like everything grown a certain way under the same conditions, even if that was to be limited by a canopy size for outdoor, say, so that your testing is at least somewhat accurate. But to put 20 pounds in there when the science could change tomorrow. I have a thermometer that I check my temperature with that I don't even touch on my forehead, that I just scroll right here. Tomorrow, somebody could come out with a little gun that detects mold and everything, or any and everything else that we need tested, or at least some of it, changing the entire testing process. And we're locked in this having every 20 pounds tested. I question batch sizes being in the Constitution. Can you explain that?
Yeah, just a second. I'm just taking a quick note. Okay, so what I want to I'll answer the batch. I'll talk about the process validation of the batch size as where that line's in there. But that is setting aside. What I want to do is I want to go back after this, and I want to talk about the balance of how much is too little and how much is too much within the frame of what we're doing. Because just as we have constitutional minimalists, believe me, I've got 80 pages from other sources that would assume all of that be in the Constitution.
Yeah,
as well.
I know how. Look, I know how big this started. I understand how big it started. I get it.
And it started at about what it is, you know. Well, but so let's talk about that. Let's talk about, because let's finish on that before we go to batch sizes. So here's the question. Here's the fundamental question. If we went in and said, there shall be created this new state agency, and then left it up to the legislature, do we trust them to fill it out from there,
I can
given
tell
everything
you,
we've seen.
I can tell you that the majority of them agree that the 10 comes out of thin air and that it should be adjusted. And most of them, if it was explained to them correctly and we had a reasonable solution, I believe that enough of them are at the point where they would get on board with it. Yes, I do.
I don't.
Okay. Well, but
I'm going off their track record, Chris. I mean, we can agree to disagree. I just have, I don't have the
all right,
faith.
then why a number? Why not parameters? Like I said, why a number? The problem's the number.
Of what exactly? The number of what?
For example, the size, the batch size.
No, I'm not talking. Okay, I'm not talking about the batch size.
Okay, go ahead. What were you talking about?
What I'm talking about is, for example, when we go back to what we were talking about how much of the description of the state agency is there, where there are 7 jobs specified, and then the boards that are underneath them that are not assistants, they're not employees, okay? They're volunteer boards, just like the main board. If we simply said, okay, there shall be this new state agency, the Oklahoma Cannabis Commission, legislature, take it from there. Do we really expect that, what do we expect that would look like from there?
You could put more in than that, but not much. And I know,
and that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
While I may not be the wordsmith, I can tell you that Lawrence has given many options on ways to get the overall idea in there without all of the bloat and without such a description, like with the different agencies, how this new agency will interact with agencies. That in itself could be more of a general statement, because most of that is assumed anyway. It doesn't have to explain how the fire marshal will interact with the agency. That it would have to do with fire and fire code. I mean, and in every agency, there's pages of that. And it just is a repeat.
That's right. Language. That's right. It describes what those, a lot of the experience that I've had dealing in this space is that agencies, okay, let's look at this. Let's look at this. Notice lack of enforcement that we have had. We saw in 1033 for the second time, the legislature have to direct in statute OSDH to fund OBNDD to take the enforcement actions that they are right now. They already had that authority. We have to direct, again, government refusal to do their job is the problem here. And so we are having to direct, a lot of these things, like with the Department of Agriculture, they're the leaders in saying, well, I can't because they, and then you get run around this bureaucratic deal. And so the reason that we have the board composed as we do, and the reason that we specify what these relationships will be like, is to ensure that that is the way that it happens. Because given what we've seen the last 3 years, it's really hard for anyone to argue that we could expect that our legislature will follow through and get that done. That's why it's there.
So if all this language is required, if all that is needed, why not just go statutory so it's easier to change when it's not? Because I don't see this fitting in 10 years. I don't see a lot of this fitting. Again, like the science of the batch size, which we'll get to.
And we'll get to batch size and just we'll do that now, but I just want to say this. We're talking about 10 years. No one could tell you what this is going to look like in 4 years. And in 4 years, we may have to come back and do this again.
But
plain
again,
and simple.
Or we could do it more general. If we're going to put it in the Constitution, we can do it differently, more individual focused, more of a broad idea for the business to cover the business issues, and just make it where it isn't going to be. We could easily get it where it wouldn't be outdated in 5 years. This could be outdated tomorrow, and just in the batch size.
Actually, this would actually be the most open-ended, furthest thinking law that we have in the nation as far as state programs. And the batch size thing, no, it couldn't be obsolete tomorrow. You know, here's something else. You know, the regulations that are, you know, it's not regulation. It's the structure of the interactions of a state agency. And, you know, that's what's in there. That doesn't just benefit businesses. It doesn't just benefit patients. It's for the community as a whole. There is not truly a patient section and a business section in here. At the end of the day, they're all the same community that are tied together. What affects those businesses affects those patients. So to that end, let's talk about the batch sizes, because it's the same thing here. What you're seeing and what you're focusing on here, you know, with the batch sizes is a very surface scratch of what's really going on in that document.
But no, but it matters.
It does matter.
It matters. So, I mean, you're dismissive of me mentioning the batch size. Like,
no, I'm not. I'm
so
no,
much
no.
more. Well, I understand that, but every word matters. We're talking about putting the Constitution.
Right. And so let's talk about what we're talking about with the batch sizes, which again, we allow the legislature to raise those batch sizes. Now, what I really like about what you said when you were talking about batch sizes earlier, you know, when we talk about the rules you're describing are actually the rules that apply to hemp. When you talk about a harvest batch, when you talk about a
parameters.
Yeah, those parameters, that's in the hemp, that is in hemp regulation right now.
Okay.
Okay. And so what you see and what we're doing in there is we are, by bringing hemp into the program, we are introducing and saying, look, cannabis is cannabis.
Yeah,
if
but
you can harvest.
No, hold on. But then you're immediately batch sizing it like it is now, just in a different size. So you're bringing them together, but then you're not using the one to benefit the other. Maybe
yes, no, yes, we are. Yes, we are. You're just missing it so far.
You're telling me that the regulations that I hear is the consensus, or that a batch size that I'm hearing is more of a consensus. You're telling me that's the batch sizing hemp, and you're going to put the two together, but we're not going to use that anymore, and we're going to use this bad one that has a number tied to it.
No, you're not seeing the, and again, I don't, you're not seeing everything that's there.
If you're talking about how it tests out will determine which train it gets on, I understand that. I do see that. I understand how this works. I've gotten into detail on this. I also understand that to some degree, when you open the door to adding some of this, you have to spell the rest of it out. I understand that. I feel like it's opened an unnecessary can of worms, but maybe I'm wrong. I want to talk about it. That's what we're doing. But I understand the way the petition works and how hemp will get on one train and medical marijuana will get on the other. So that, for example, if you're a hemp grower, you won't lose your harvest if it tests hot. It can end up being in the other, it could end up on a medical marijuana train, so to speak.
No, actually it couldn't.
Well, that's okay. Explain then what happens.
So what we do in there is we talk about the difference between when we're talking about the relationship of certified hemp and marijuana. We defer to because we have to, at a federal level, we have to defer to the USDA program that is run through the Department of Agriculture. If you are growing certified hemp through that program and your hemp tests hot, that hemp is part of that program you lose your hemp. We can't change that. Okay.
Okay.
What we are doing is when we talk about the batch size, you've got, let's talk about what that is. What we do here is we eliminate in process for marijuana or hemp as it comes into the chain. We eliminate the testing of every 10 pounds or every 15 pounds or every 20 pounds or every 50 pounds, I believe is where we're at now, of product before it goes to the processor, from grower to processor. Right now, we test that product. If that product is going to a concentrate, it then gets tested again. There is no need for a mandated test between the grower and the processor that jacks up the cost on patients and slows down the supply chain. There's no need for that. We eliminate that. The 20-pound size is a little bit larger than what is now allowed by law. And as a grower and someone who has handled tons and tons and tons of this material, and talking with other folks that have, it's reasonable to test every 20 pounds. The sniffer you were talking about?
Yeah.
I've got one for marijuana, but I can't test my own product. That wouldn't be ethical, would it? So those technologies are
right, it'll definitely seriously change the way it has to be. It could be tested, and
well, and maybe that makes it cheaper for tests to occur from a lab that you have to deal with, and maybe that helps them reduce the costs if they desire. But at the end of the day, that technology doesn't change, basically the amount that you should test coming through.
So let me ask this: why not do parameters?
We have set parameters.
By
so
weight.
what we have done. Okay, let me walk through. Let's do this, man. Let me walk through what that system looks like front to back under this design. It's
Sure.
real simple. Okay. So grower goes to processor, no mandated testing. No mandated testing. Growers and processors will want to, do some testing independently in there if they've got a entity to entity transfer. Grower to dispensary of smokable flower tested every 20 pounds. Okay. So grower to processor, no testing mandated. When you come out the back end at the processor, then if you have 50 pounds of dry concentrate because it's been cleaned, this would cover pre-roll material. This would cover keef. Dry concentrate every 50 pounds. The product has now been homogenized. And so it's easier to test and have a homogenized batch than say bud to bud to bud coming in the biomass. Now, from there, you have that 50 pounds, or as it is right now, 10,007 grams of distillate or solvent-based concentrate that comes through. Why 10,007? So 10,000 is 10 liters even. The 7 is thrown on there so that a processor could take a sample for testing and still have 10 liters and doesn't put them in a position where you've got 1 liter that's a little bit short. It might sound frivolous, but it is important.
No, it makes sense.
So the next parameter is this: good manufacturing practices. When right now, we have, and I believe there might be some traction in this direction, but what we do is once that distillate or that concentrate has been tested and it goes into edibles, we know potencies and such generally by the weight of those products. And so what we do is we say that the testing of those products, now that we have verified that we are not adding in any pesticides, heavy metals, or whatever with the marijuana product, once it goes to there, it is subject to good manufacturing. It's no more, our testing will be no more restrictive than current guidelines for good manufacturing practices at the federal level. So what that means is that your typical food safety things that are in place, those protocols, say for making gummies of any kind, for making chips of any kind, for making brownies of any kind, those are the rules that are in play. There's not additional testing of every 10 pounds of gummies that you make for heavy metals or terpenes that don't exist. So what we've set up here is the most streamlined method of testing in the supply chain that we can have, but still ensure consumer safety. We also allow the legislature to adjust those batch sizes up. We also say that in the event of federal legalization, that none of this that we have in our program, from testing protocols, possession limits, et cetera, shall be any more restrictive than what federal law allows.
Let me ask a question. If this is about making it safer for the patient, why are we not fixing the testing issue? And in fact, we're doubling the flower size. It sounds great on the processor side. Everything goes that direction. It sounds like you got it covered. I've had that process explained to me so many times. I pretty well understand it, and it makes sense. So I get that. But again, back to the flower size, the batch size on flower. Currently, our testing is a joke, and all we've done is made the batch size bigger. So, I mean, if we're going to fix it, if it's about doing the right thing by the patients, if we're going to adjust the testing, maybe we could somehow figure out a way to put in a way to homogenize the flower. You pull from different areas of the plant, and then it's homogenized to get a sample. Look, here's the deal. I've been to a lot of grows just like you have, and I can tell you one of the most popular brands in this city. I was in their grow just out of town, and I was there shopping for a dispensary, and I was watching their auto flower, their auto trimmer, as it was trimming bud, and guys were bagging it up. I'm not a fan of auto trimmers, but whatever. You got a lot of bud. Shoot, I just bought one for myself, so I get it. I bought a small one. They suck.
Yeah, you trim all that shit, man.
Yeah, I get it. I understand that. I'm not a fan, but I understand that. And of course, they're blasting it with CO2, and then they're tumbling it in this net. And we all know that is knocking off an enormous amount of the keef. And in fact, while we're there, we're talking to them about their keef. They have now discovered they have 5 pounds of keef sitting around. And so we're looking at buying that too. And then they say, then the guy comes out of the same room where I watched the flower come out and go into the trimmer. He comes out of the same room with 7 bags and says, here, smell these. These are going to testing. And there's 7 of the prettiest buds he could find in the dry room. They weren't what they're bagging up. They're going to freeze it, shake off the keef, and then bag it, but they're going to put that 32% or whatever ridiculous number they get from the lab that they send it to. So if we're going to fix testing, we just made that, if this passed, that just makes that just a bigger batch. Is there something we could do about that, perhaps? There's other ways of doing testing. As you said, homogenizing. You pull from the 3 different levels of the plant, but this could end up getting to the point where the lab has to come pull the sample. So are we going to do it right, or are we just going to do it? And that's a bit of a bigger question. The testing isn't all on you. So that's a bit of a bigger issue with the industry. But I'm asking, if we're going to change testing issues in here, shouldn't we get it right with the patient?
Here's the thing, is that, again, this is what we're doing here. What we are addressing is just a very, very, very core fundamental process in the supply chain, right? What you're describing is what you're describing is basically the scruples and ethics of growers, processors, in how they handle that product. So without going into a level of minutia and regulation that ultimately involves, I mean, it's not like I've just been to a lot of grows. I grow and I grow to scale, man. I know what can be done, what can't be done. I know what it looks like to pull this stuff in out of the field, what it looks like to pull in flower out of outdoors that isn't moldy, what you have to do to make sure those things don't happen, So I'm really, really hands-on with this. I get it. I've been covered in resin more times than I care to just walking through a field, but what you're describing, that's where there's a certain amount of this that it's like, it's kind of like seed to sale tracking. You can put a tag on a plant, but unless you physically harvest that plant yourself, you can't tell me what that plant produced, And so it's like, if you wanted to stamp out diversion, if you wanted to stamp out bad practices like this, then what you have to do is you have to add more regulation and more cost per se. If the labs have to come out and pull the samples themselves that they then test, that's going to be an additional cost, So it's one of those things where ultimately I hope that this program and I hope this nation are able to ultimately come to find that balance that, helps with those quality controls.
So then again, if it's down to trusting the people, then why not make it like you just described? You said hemp was parameters instead of the 20 pounds. If we're not going to fix the testing anyway, if it's just a number, why not for the sake of the growers that just grow flower and that's what they have to have tested?
You know what? I'm glad you came back to that. The parameters are there in the broadest sense. What we're doing by picking on the batch sizes is we are identifying a couple of marks. We leave the legislature flexibility to change those numbers. Okay. But here's one thing that's really important. And this is another reason to bring hemp in. Right now, the hemp products that are sold out, that are certified hemp products that are sold, I can take and grow 200 acres of certified hemp under the current regulations that we have. And I can get it tested for one thing, THC. At the point that it has 0.3 or less THC, I've got certified hemp that I can sell in whatever manner that I want to sell it in. Okay. Where's the testing for heavy metals? Where's the testing for pesticides? It's not there. So you can go into a lot of, there are a lot of reputable shops, but there are so many CBD products out there on the market that have no testing for consumer safety as we know it for MMJ.
Right.
It is not there.
I understand the flaw in.
Yeah, it's a giant flaw. We're fixing a gigantic consumer safety hole with this.
I understand.
Yeah, that needs to be noted. There's a giant hole that when we talk about that program, when we talk about ODAF, they will simply say, well, we can't because FDA hasn't done anything. That's one of the reasons that we have to spell these things out.
Well, I hate to keep beating you up with it, but again, I don't agree with putting a batch size in the Constitution.
Sure. Well,
what do you think about, why are we doing this constitutional? Why not statutory? I'm curious. What's your reasoning? I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I want to hear it again. After all this, with all the extra stuff in there, why not statutory like 788 was? Do you think it would just be a complete waste of time, or at least for the full access?
So why do we do this constitutional as opposed to statutory for full access specifically?
Yeah.
Well, until it is done, it is not done. And we could run, I know of other folks that are, looking at constitutional petitions right now. They very well might put them into the field. And so it's one of those things where, lack of a better way of putting it, I don't think we should unilaterally disarm. Until it's done, it's not done.
So there's not definitions written yet. How is someone working on that, or how soon realistically do you see filing this? Because again, I saw a post said you were going to be done Friday, so you've obviously said that's not the case. But
no, that's one post on Facebook. What we are doing is available on the website, in the docs, in the disclaimer. If anything changes, that's where it changes.
Okay.
So definitions, there are a minimal number of definitions that need to be added. A lot of those definitions are already in statute.
Well, but
it should be fine there.
But if you're gonna have put this in the Constitution, the definitions have to go with it.
To a certain degree. To things that are not already defined.
All right. So again, I look forward to the lawyers taking a look at this. I have issues. I really appreciate you coming on here. I really do. And
sure.
I've tried to beat you up a little bit. Sorry about that. I don't see the reason to put all that agency stuff in the Constitution. I think it could be done in a much more streamlined way. Just last night when we were taking a look at it, we were able to come up with a few pages that could, and I can't remember what they were right now, but it was easy to drop 3 pages. So, and it was things that just to me and to us don't make sense going in the Constitution.
Sure.
So
sure. And you know what, Chris, that's the toughest part about doing what I'm doing, is that there is an entire other group, there's an entire other segment of this community that would say the same thing about the patient protections.
Well, again, that's if we're going to.
And so that's the thing is that, we have to remember, especially when you have one side say beating up on another, even if they don't, if they don't feel the same reason of importance.
I'm not beating up on the other. No, don't get me wrong. This isn't about, I don't want anybody walking away from here thinking I don't like the businesses. And I understand the need for the businesses. Okay. So I don't want anyone thinking I don't like the businesses. I question putting all this business stuff in the Constitution. It wouldn't matter the industry. Can you tell me, maybe I'm wrong, and this is what I need, maybe is some examples, so I'll start to understand why you want to do it like this.
Okay,
what other industry lays itself out like that so much in the Constitution? Is that how other industries do it?
What other industry was born by this process?
I understand the
it's an anomaly, Chris. That's the problem. So when we compare to other industries, oil, for example, was not an industry that was there. Then it was outlawed. People were persecuted for 100 years for being part of it. And then all of a sudden, by the act of the people, it became legal again. This is an anomaly situation. And what I'm saying is that what you see that could potentially be removed, it could be if we trusted our government to do a 180 shift in what they have done so far. And again, those things, like when we talk about the batch sizes and where that are flexible, and some of those things like, that you said it could be cut out. Again, there are not 50 something jobs created. There are 7 jobs created, a couple of which already exist. So, the thing here is that in my mind, ensuring that those businesses and ensuring that the agency that is established provide us with some actual transparency, accountability, and input as a community as a whole into the process, whether you see it or not as a patient advocate, those things do benefit patients.
You know, that was something I'm glad you mentioned the patient advocate part, because I was going to wrap this up, but I didn't even mention that part yet. We have to talk about that part.
Sure.
The signature getting to get on, to be, not to get on the board, I understand, but to be considered for the board. I understand the board is picked by the same people who picked other boards, the governor, the floor leader or speaker, one or the other, one on each side, things like
Yeah,
that.
the governor, number one in the House, number one in the Senate.
Right. So
that's
just
the
like
standard fare there.
Right. Just like any other agency, any other
Right.
government agency. But to get considered for that, you have to win a popularity contest. And it's
No,
one, yeah, you do. And it's one you got to buy, and it's one you'd have that could be bought and paid for. The signature gathering down to 20 or 200 signatures for a patient to get to be considered for the board.
okay.
It's
Okay,
like
so let's
processors. So
no, let's address that for what it is first. Okay, let's address that for what it is. Okay, and I've said the entire time, and I've just gotten, some folks that have been involved in this the whole way, this has really started to peak as an issue. I've heard these concerns about it. I told everyone going in, I wanted to see what folks had to say about this. But let's be clear about one thing. This isn't a popularity contest, okay? All it is a minimum bar for someone. If you are going to step up and say, I represent patients, I represent growers, I represent caregivers, then there is a minimal bar where you have to demonstrate that you have peers that will sign off on that.
Yeah, you have to have fans. It becomes no, seriously. Any influencer, any one of these influencers could whip out the signatures in a weekend at an event.
But that doesn't mean they get appointed.
No, but if that's all there is to choose from, because those are the only patients that could go through the work of getting 200 signatures. I've got a friend in a wheelchair. She can't get out and go get 200 signatures, but I'd sure like to see her on the board because she can answer some real helpful questions.
Could you help her get those signatures if you believed in her?
I probably could, but you're
okay.
Well, but there's 100 other, no, there's 1,000 others like her who don't have someone like me they could call. No, that doesn't work. It doesn't work because I can get my friend on there. That's the problem.
No, well, now here's the thing. The best, I've had a lot of feedback on that. Okay. And what I have heard, if I averaged all the feedback that I've heard on that, it would be this. It would be to drop it on the patients, would be to drop it to around 50 signatures to do that. And I can see the merit in that.
I think
but considering we're going to have one spot or two spots on that board where you are going to stand there and represent the patients of Oklahoma, I don't see where 50 signatures is too high of a bar.
It's not about just the patient representative. It's about every one of them. What if you have some small business person somewhere who doesn't know that many people or something, and he might be perfect for the board and he wants to do it. Now he's got to go and get his competition to sign off on him being on the board.
Yeah.
I have seen so much cutthroat stuff since this industry started. I mean, these people sit across the street from each other and call the OBNDD, and they're going to have to count on the goodwill of their competition to it should be anybody willing to sign up. Let them pick from a bigger number. Anyone willing to put in the effort. Lay out
Okay,
what the
okay.
lay out what the
So here's the,
lay out
so
what
here's,
the look, lay out what the requirements are going to be. Is this a paid thing? Is this a voluntary thing? How many hours does it
well,
take?
hold on,
And then
hold on.
ask everybody who would be willing to step up.
Okay, so hold on. Let's do two things here. Okay, let's do two things here. Let's imagine that because here's the thing, I have zero interest in being on this board. Okay, zero. Here's what we can do. Here's what we could do. If it is that much angst, then everyone, I want to say this, we can pull all signature requirements from this. Okay, we can pull the entire process, but you won't be guaranteed that you'll have a board formed anytime soon. Okay, we can remove all of it, all of the signatures. Now, here's what happens. Anyone that wants to apply, right? So how about the guy that, you know, is looking to use that seat for political advantage, that has donated a bunch of money to the person that would appoint them. And there you go.
Yeah. And getting 5 signatures from your buddies because you're a processor doesn't stop you from being that person. So why bother with all
Let me
that
put it to you this
verbiage
way.
in there?
I know of a lab owner. I know of a lab owner who would exactly fit that, and he'd be the worst damn one to have on that board. And he'd be the first one to get appointed if there aren't signatures. Fortunately, we're not putting a lab guy on that. So it's kind of like this. There is no perfect way to do this. Plain and simple. At the end of the day, this is one of these things where we're just going to have to let go and trust human nature, and it's going to be what it's going to be. But if you want to go through then and spell out all of the duties, all of that, again, that's where you're starting to add those pages, you know?
No, I don't think it should be in the Constitution. So
Yeah.
not adding nothing because of me. So beyond
Right,
basic
right.
rights. So I
So
agree.
what
We'd have one page to create the agency and a little bit of oversight and something about any set of rules that comes forward has to be put before an advisory board and has to somehow come to majority support.
Right. So let me ask you this. If we're going to have people that represent our community, be it patients, caregivers, or commercial licensees, should it be a bare minimum that they have one of those licenses themselves, that they are a patient, they are a grower, processor, or other?
Yeah. Yeah, if that's what they're going to represent, yeah, then they need to represent that. And
They should at least be a license holder of that sort, correct?
yeah, yeah. And in fact, if they're a patient, then they should have no financial interest in the cannabis industry. And I mean, not be slinging products on Facebook. I do, because that is, again, the problem. That has nothing to do with what being who's best for the patient, for the sickest people among us, the people we intended this program to be for, some of which are still denied access. So yeah, I think there shouldn't be. I think anyone who's willing to look at what is going to be required of them and throw their name in the bucket, if that's what it is, 'cause that's what it is anyway, then
yeah, there's no getting around
they
that.
should be able to do that. And they could probably get these signatures if they're that drawn to be on the board. So, but again, I don't think we should be putting that you get all these signatures to be on the board in the Constitution. It doesn't fit to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, it's one of those things. I mean, let's call it for what it is. Signatures or no signatures, anything that we write can be subverted, perverted, and corrupted.
So save
That's
yourself
reality.
a lot. So save yourself a lot of headache and a lot of time and cut this down. And if it, because it all comes down to what the human nature is going to do anyway, to some degree. So
Right, which is why we have to take it to a certain degree of guardrails. If you know, if folks don't believe that they want to, if the consensus is here after another week or so, that folks think that that the signature requirement to be part of your application to be on the board is that terrible of a thing, then we can get it out of there.
okay, well, let me say, I'm doing this because I still want to be at the table and I still want to keep working together. So I don't want anybody thinking that this is me coming out and saying, stop what you're doing or anything remotely like that. This is me working with you, not
Yeah,
not
yeah.
against you. This is me working with you, not against you. We
Hey,
have a difference of opinion on this part. I'm hoping the community will see it my way. You're hoping the community see it your way. I'm sure whichever way that is how hopefully will be how it ends up.
hey, at the end of the day, I'm not going to say that I don't care, because I do care about all of it. But, again, this is a community driven effort. This was put out here with the expectation that we might have some very, animated conversations about some of these things. And it's not really about my way. I truly am going off of what I see the consensus to generally be. I'm basically good with that, you know. I'm basically good with that.
Conversations are definitely what we're going to keep having about this. In fact, tomorrow night, this was an extra show we just kind of threw together, and I appreciate you doing it. But
Sure.
tomorrow night, we're going to do Lawrence will be here, and Chip Paul will be here, and Raymond Storm will be here, and we'll bounce it around a bunch more and get into some more of the detail. I'm sure Raymond, or you might from Facebook. He's a patient advocate, has been since before 788. He was one of the signature gatherers on that.
Yeah,
So,
he's a good dude. Yeah, no, he's a good
yeah, he's a
dude.
good friend. So
No, that's what I'd really like to that's what I'd really like to hear more about, would be talk about these signatures, what might be acceptable, might not be, let me know. It's all
well,
good to me.
it should be good. And then Sunday, Dranham. Sorry, I don't remember his last name off the top of my head, but Dranham will be here Sunday along with Lawrence and somebody else. Not sure who yet, but anyway, we're going to keep talking about this at least a couple times a week, before you file it and even after you file it and all the way through. So it should be a lot of fun. Should have some good conversation. Well, Jed, I appreciate you coming on here and going through this. I really do. I hope I haven't been too rude. I know I get a little bit loud, but I'm just a loud talker.
But Chris, you don't bother me at all.
It's all been meant to work through this. The goal being that at the end of the day, we're all still sitting at the table together. You know, we're not at the end yet, so hopefully that is what will happen.
Yeah, no, that's always happy to hop in and have a conversation with you about it. I mean, that's what I'm here for, is to answer questions to the degree that I can, and just talk to everyone that wants to talk and see if I can't get something together and that we can all hopefully get behind. If we can,
Well,
great. If we can't, there it is.
well, maybe when you decide it's done, you can come back and show it to us. We can, excuse me, we can do the screen share and go through some of it, and once it's done, and not fight over it, but just let everybody see what's in it before you file it, maybe, or maybe after you file it, however you feel like doing that. But
No, we'll do it Chris, when we have, and I've laid that out, when we're at a point where I have something that I'm ready to file based on what I believe to be the consensus that I've been able to gather, then, we'll run down it one more time and see what everyone has to say. And
okay, well,
if we seem to have an overwhelming majority consensus of support behind it, then we'll file it. If we don't, then we just won't.
okay, well, I'll keep doing everything I can to push for some kind of consensus on something. So I'll do all I can to bring attention to it and see what we can do to help you work it out. You know,
Yeah.
I just want to remind everybody, some may know what it is, but behind me, unfortunately, it's the picture didn't show up right. It's the Cannabis Constitution of Oklahoma, something Lawrence wrote at the beginning. So with a little influence from me. So I like to get that in there. I had a little influence. So all right. Well, Jed, I appreciate you coming on here. We will have you back again soon. Until then, everybody go to Orca. What is it? orcaok.com.
That's simple.
Took me right there, and there everything was right there. So it said donate right there on the front. First thing popped up. What a shocker. I'm kidding. So I appreciate
Did I
you
actually pop up first?
it was on the open screen. That's all. I'm just teasing you. Just teasing.
Okay.
Got to raise
Yeah,
money.
because I don't play that shit. I'm not worried about donations right now. What I'm worried about is people's input. I will literally have that shit taken off of there.
Oh, like I said, it wasn't a big deal. I'm just giving you a hard time. Maybe everybody will go there and donate. So there you go.
Well, I mean, let's figure out language. Let's see if we're where we need to be on language first. You know, the dollars are there. I'm not worried about that.
All right, Jed. Well, I appreciate your time. All right, folks. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Raymond Storm, Lawrence Pasternak, and Chip Paul. Until then, stay grumpy. I'll see you on the road.